Well, hello. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Bible Story Children's Time. Today is the last story time we're telling this week, and we'll be back on Monday. But today we are continuing with the story of Joseph the Dreamer. This was Joseph, son of Jacob, who was the guy who had a coat of many colors. That's how he's often thought of. And he was the one who was the younger brother who got kidnapped by his older brothers and sold into slavery, ended up in Egypt. And at the end of yesterday's passage and story, he had just told the Pharaoh about an upcoming famine that the Pharaoh had dreamt about. And he had been able to interpret the dream and then suggest that somebody be appointed to prepare for the famine. And Pharaoh picked him. So Pharaoh picked Joseph to be the man in charge of preparing for the famine. He was the famine czar. That's what he would be today. And the Pharaoh said, this guy is in charge of everything. He can have anything he wants. The only thing he can't have is my throne. So with that in mind, Joseph began a tour of the country in which he started setting up procedures for maximizing the harvest, getting the most grain possible now in the 7 years before the famine hit, and then setting up a network of granaries for storing the grain that was harvested. And while he was doing all this, he also found time to marry and to have 2 kids. Their names were Manasseh, and that is from the Hebrew word that says, God has made me forget all my troubles and all my father's household. And the other son was named Ephraim, and that was because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. That's what that means. So, as I said, Joseph took over all this stuff. He was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh. So he's a young man by our standards. And there were 7 years of abundance. There were 7 years of bumper crops in Egypt. They had grain coming out of their ears. The granaries were full. And then it happened. The famine hit. It was bad. It was bad in Egypt. It was bad in the lands around Egypt. As they say, it was bad worldwide. It was the world as they knew it. And then the people of Egypt started to cry to Pharaoh for food. They would send representatives to the Pharaoh, or they would go themselves and say, hey, Pharaoh, dude, we're starving here. So what are you going to do about it? And he said, well, remember, there is a man who was appointed to deal with this very problem. And that guy's name is Joseph. So go over there and talk to Joseph. And Joseph, with all of the granaries that he controlled, remember, 7 years of grain surplus were stored away. Joseph had a unique approach to dealing with this, because when the people came to him looking for food, he sold it to them. It was not relief the way we think of it, where starving people go for food and the government gives them food. or some charitable organization gives them food. No, Joseph sold them food. They were happy because at least they were eating. And word got out to the world around them that if you were hungry and you wanted some food, Egypt was the place you needed to go. As luck would have it, that very word reached Canaan, where Joseph's family, his first family, I guess we should call them, where they lived. His brothers, 11 of them, and Jacob, his father. So they were starving. And they were sitting around saying, man, I'm hungry. You hungry? Yeah, me too. And a lot of this was going on, and they were talking about how hungry they were. And finally, Jacob said, you know what, guys? You've been talking about being hungry for a long time, and nobody's doing anything. So here's what you need to do. Grab some money, go down to Egypt, and buy some grain so we don't all die. Try doing that instead of just talking about it. So they kind of went, oh, fine, yeah, we'll go. And 10 of the brothers, 10 of the 11, departed from Canaan to go down to Egypt to buy grain. Jacob kept Benjamin, who was the next youngest brother after Joseph, who, for all they knew, was dead. Kept Benjamin, and it's very interesting. Genesis says here, Jacob did not send Benjamin with the others because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Jacob had some idea, somehow, that the other brothers had been behind whatever it was that happened to Joseph. So he wasn't willing to risk his next favorite son, Benjamin. So all of the other brothers go down to Canaan. They get in line in front of Joseph so that they can buy some grain. And when they get to the head of the line, they all don't recognize him. Because here now, he was 30 when he took over as grain czar, or famine czar. 7 years passed. So now he is at least 37 years old. Maybe a little bit older than that, depending on how long they waited. So it's like 20 years after the last time they had seen him. They don't recognize him anymore. Not only has he matured, but he's also wearing Egyptian garb. He's wearing Egyptian clothing. They used to be pretty heavy into makeup. Egyptian men were. Royalty, anyway. And of course, there's that thing of they never expected to see their brother again, so they had no reason to be thinking that, oh, hey, what? This guy might be him. No, they weren't even thinking that way. So they didn't recognize him. They got in front of Joseph, and they bowed down, and then they straightened out, and Joseph immediately recognized them. But he didn't let on. He said, so, guys, where are you from? Where do you hail from? You're obviously foreigners here. And they said, well, we're from the land of Canaan, and we're here to buy food. And Joseph looked at his brothers. He said, no. You know what? I think you're spies. I think you're spies. You're here to find out where we are weak, where we are unprotected. And immediately their faces kind of went, ooh, no, this isn't good. We don't want this guy getting mad. So, no, they said, no, Lord, no, that's not it at all. We are servants. We are your servants, Most High Grain Commissioner. We are your servants, and we're just here to buy food. We are all the sons of one man, and we are honest men. We're not spies. And Joseph played it up. He said, no, I'm pretty sure you guys are spies. You know what? You look like spies. He said, no, dude, trust me. We're not spies. We're just simple country folk here to buy grain. You know, there's 10 of us now. We were 12 brothers at one time, all the sons of one man. And our youngest brother is back with our father right now, back in Canaan. And our very youngest brother is dead. Joseph wouldn't let up. He said, no, you are spies. And this is how you're going to be tested. You will not leave this place until your younger brother comes to take you home. One of you can leave, go back to Canaan, get your brother, and get your butts back here, and then I'll release all of you. But until that happens, until you prove who you are, instead of this wild story that you're telling me, you're going to prison. And the 10 brothers looked at one another and they said, come on. Among themselves, they said, you know what? We're getting punished now because of what happened to our brother. That's not fair. You know, when you guys threw him in the cistern and you guys, you know, sold him into slavery, we saw how distressed he was. We should have never done what we did. He pleaded for his life, but you wouldn't listen. And everybody looked and said, you know, what are you talking about? Us, me. You were there. You didn't listen either. And they said, you know what? This is just all coming back to roost now. We're being punished for what we did, and now we have to give an accounting for the blood on our hands. And they were speaking back and forth in Hebrew. Their conversation with Joseph had been in Egyptian. They didn't realize that Joseph could understand them. So Joseph was taking all of this in. So he turned away from them because it was kind of breaking his heart. And then he came back and he picked Simeon out of the crowd, and he had Simeon bound and taken away. And then he gave orders to have their sacks filled with grain, and to put each man's silver that they had paid for the grain, to put that back in the sacks as well. And after all this was done, they loaded the grain up on the donkeys, and they left. And at the place where they stopped for the night, the first stop on the way back to Canaan, they opened the grain sacks to get feed for the donkeys, and went, uh-oh, my silver has been returned. And they looked at one another and went, What? Why do we have the silver here? What is this? What's God doing to us? Because they saw it as a trap. And when they got back to Canaan, looking over their shoulder the whole time, when they got back to Canaan, they went to the father, Jacob, and they said, you know what, Dad? The guy who's in charge of the grain back there in Egypt, he talked mean to us. He talked mean. He didn't treat us well. He thought we were spies. And then we said to him, no, we're honest men. We're just, peasant farmers coming from Canaan. And then that man said, and I know you're not going to like this, but that man said, we have to bring Benjamin back to prove who we are. Dad, like I said, I know you're not going to like this, but he said Benjamin had to return for him to believe us. And Jacob said, no way, dudes, this is not going to happen. And they kept saying, this is how it has to be. And Jacob said, my son. Note how he says this, my son. So he cuts all of them out at this point. He says, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead. That's Joseph. His brother is dead, and he, Benjamin, is the only one I have left. If he comes on this journey that you want him to take, you will be the death of me. So no. And that's where the story will end today. There's more to come. There's lots more to come. Because this is a tale with a lot of twists and turns. But you'll have to wait till Monday to hear what happens next. So have a great weekend. Stay healthy. And we will see you here on Monday at 4 o'clock.